In today's episode, denied a raise and moved to overnight position and told don't care how you do your job, just do it. Okay, I will. I was fired for inadvertently stumbling on my boss's malfeasance. I used his obsession with golf and watches to get him fired. I thought I was done with my revenge, till my former boss gave me a second chance years later. So let's get started. Denied a raise and moved to overnight position and told don't care how you do your job, just do it. Okay, I will. I used to work in hotels in a ski town in Colorado. Very expensive, but the quality of life, very common saying there. I had started at a new hotel and was making $10 an hour living with my brother in a 2-bedroom place that was $700 SQ Fort rent was half our income. When the slow season approached, I was told I would have to move to night audit, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., or risk being let go. The problem was I lived 3 miles from the hotel and took the bus to get there, since I couldn't afford a car. The bus did not run at night or early morning, so I would be walking 6 miles a day and several inches to a foot or more in snow. So I asked for a raise. They said they'd get back to me but need an answer, and I need the job, so okay, I'll work night audit. I start the next week as an auditor, and while I'm being trained I learned that I'm also losing a day. The other auditor works 3 days, and I'll be working 4 days, not 5. That's $320 a month hit to my income before taxes. So I'll need to be making $12.50 an hour to keep making the same thing with the cut hours. But I decide I'm going to ask for $14. I complete training and meet with the GM. He asks how I'm liking it, and I start off with my concerns. I tell him I wasn't told I'd lose a day, and with having to walk 6 miles a day in the snow, I was going to need a raise to $14 an hour. He let out an audible sigh and tells me he can easily hire someone for this position for $10 an hour and to take it or leave it. I knew it would be very hard to find a job in the winter when everything closes up, so I stayed. As I walked out of his office, he says, I don't care how you do your job, just do it. Okay, I will. You see, this job was easy. It was 7 hours of me doing absolutely nothing and 1 hour of actual work, which gave me plenty of time to find shortcuts. The software we used allowed us to import scripts that you downloaded from the developer's site. One such script was a way to make my job literally one click. The problem was it was $500 a year license for it. Obviously, I wouldn't propose to my GM a way to eliminate my job. But there was a free trial on every script for 7 days. I remember at the time you get around paywalls on news websites by going into the web console and simply removing the paywall from the source code. I decided to see if this was something I could do with this script. And what do you know, I downloaded it and opened the script in a text editor, and the only thing making this script a trial was a line that said, Licensee XP, and had the date set 7 days out from when I downloaded it. I changed the computer's date to 8 days from now and tried to run the script in our software, and got a notification that said the free trial had ended. So I changed it back and set the expiration date to 2050. This took my manual job of 1 hour and made it 3 to 5 minutes. All I had to do was specify a date range and it'd check off what reports I wanted done and printed and click start. That was it. I always manually reviewed everything just in case. But that wasn't it. We had a kitchen where we made breakfast and dinner for the guests. Evening shift got free dinner, and morning shift got free breakfast. I didn't get anything. They eventually decided to have the auditors set up breakfast, so the kitchen crew didn't have to come in as early. I asked if we got free breakfast and was told no, despite setting up everything to make their jobs easier. I should also note that we had to clean any dishes left from dinner that the kitchen didn't get to, despite not even getting any dinner. But I had the kitchen all to myself for 6 hours. So I started making myself dinner around 1 a.m. Whatever I wanted. The only limits were the ingredients in the kitchen, and since I was responsible for dishes from other shifts, I never left any evidence behind. I no longer had to buy food to bring to work. I later realized that I could put dirty dishes back in the return bin since it was covered, and the breakfast crew never checked to see if any dirty dishes were in it, and the very few times they did check, they assumed dinner forgot to check before leaving. I always cleaned up the dishes I used, making myself food out of fairness though. So now my job no longer requires me to do dishes, I get free food, and all I have to do is remember the date and click a button to do my actual job. What am I to do with all this time? I watched so many shows. I played online games on my laptop. I started learning Spanish. The GM did say he didn't care how I did my job, just do it, and so I did. I did eventually decide to move away for a much better job far away, and had to give up the comfy life. I trained my replacement the way I was doing things, including the script, and did not teach him the manual way. Before I left though, I decided to change the trial date to 1 week out. 2 days after my last day, the front desk manager texts me and tells me that the other auditor was just fired for making racist remarks to a guest, and that guest recorded him, so he was fired once the GM got in. He asked if I could come back until they got someone else, and said they'd pay me $15 an hour. Unfortunately, I was leaving in 2 days, so there was no way. I got a call from the GM at about 5 a.m. the day of the expiration, and he asked about this free trial thing, and why wasn't the new guy trained how to do the audit properly, who was apparently working 7 days a week since no one else knew the audit except the new guy and of course me. I reminded him that he told me he didn't care how I did my job, just do it, so I did exactly that. I could tell he wanted to yell, but he held back. He then demanded I come back and fix it, or he'll have to take legal action. I told him I was already at my new place 2,000 miles away, but I would happily do it for airfare, a free room, free meals while I'm there, and $10,000. That was when he lost it, and I hung up. He texted me after saying he was contacting the lawyers, and that I have get up and prepare to face the consequences. That was 5 years ago, and I haven't heard anything from him since. I did eventually go back to that town a few months ago to see my mom, and ran into the front desk manager from that place, who was a really nice guy. He told me the GM was caught king the head housekeeper in his office by his wife one day. Later divorced him. The 19-year-old girl working the front desk in the mornings later filed sexual harassment charges against him, and he resigned after that. The AGM jumped ship after that. The GM was also a coach for a baseball team and hit a kid with a metal bat, breaking his arm, and got his *T rocked by the dad. Not sure what happened to him after that. The front desk manager now runs the place as GM, and he's made sure that he, the AGM, and the FDM are all trained to do the audit. I was fired for inadvertently stumbling on my boss's malfeasance. I used his obsession with golf and watches to get him fired. This was in the last throes of the analog mid-90s. Fax machines, FedEx, dial-up computing and voicemail were the most common business tools. I was a young regional sales manager for a major branded consumer product. I covered the grocery class of trade in 11 western states. My division worked out of Chicago, and I had a home office on the West Coast. I had made my reputation by typically making my quota and keeping costs within budget. I would get reassigned to struggling markets, and more often than not, I would usually make my sales number. Nothing too fancy, I just figured where the best opportunities were and concentrated on them. In those days, we had something called Market Development Funds (MDF), or as we called it, making days fun. In the time before such things were deemed illegal, it was money we could literally use for almost anything you could imagine: wining and dining, sending buyers to the Super Bowl, taking them on market research trips. I once took 6 honchos for a weekend of fishing in Mexico, as long as you had the receipts and your boss knew, except in cases where they specifically asked not to know. We were free to spend money as we saw fit. This was old school Mad Men style slush funds. All tax deductible. Typically the MDF money was 2% of your total annual gross sales, and was use it or lose it, meaning it had to be spent because it wouldn't roll over. I always had some left over. As a team player, I would let my boss, Sasquatch, know, so he could use it. No big deal. Towards the end of the year, my weekly FedEx pack from the company started including sign-offs for payments to a supplier I had never heard of before, What was weird is they were for a demo company that wasn't one of my regional suppliers. If you have ever been offered a sample or a coupon in a grocery store, that was a demo company. I called the broker/agent in that market and learned that they had never used the company or even heard of them. I finally figured out that they were from Sasquatch and that he had thrown them in with my other sign-offs. I called him and asked if he knew what they were. He said that they should be assigned to my MDF and not to worry about them. This was a little unusual because demos would normally be taken out of other monies or came down from marketing. Whatever, I signed off on them. Hung out to dry. About 3 months later, I was called into HQ for a meeting where I was told I was being transferred to a market that I had never worked before and would be required to relocate. At the time, my wife was pregnant, read her ProRevenge story in my feed, and we just started an extensive remodel on our newly purchased house. The company had some relocation benefits, but it was just too hectic to pull up roots and move to the southeast. I declined the offer and was told that I could look for another job within the company or receive a severance package. I wound up taking the severance. The truth comes to light. Several months later, one of my ex-coworkers told me that my region had been taken over by one of Sasquatch's past work associates who he managed to get hired in my spot, and that the region was tanking badly. Nothing made sense. Why was I terminated and then replaced by someone who lived in another city and who couldn't do the job? I started to think in my naivety that I may have put a target on my back. After some research and digging, which was much harder before the internet, I learned that the demo company billing the MDF was based in my ex-boss's previous city and was just a P.O. box, a telephone, and a DBA registered by the new person in my job. I found out it was his girlfriend/mistress. I was livid. Like most people, I tend to plan revenge in my head, but never really go through with it. Most of the time, it's a coping mechanism and not very useful in moving on past being wronged. But this was so egregious, so uncalled for, and so disruptive to my life that I felt I had to get even. My plan evolved to take this guy down. Whatever the time it took. Whatever the cost in lives or money. I was going to get this mofo. I may have been able to rat him out to the company, but they might have dismissed my complaint as coming from a disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind. The hook. I decided that I was going to approach Guy as a phony recruiter, not just a guy collecting resumes, but as a retained corporate headhunter, someone paid to onboard people for big jobs. I had spent a year early in my career working for a super exclusive headhunting firm, and knew exactly what transpired in the process. My subterfuge required international telexes, phony letterhead, fake English accents, and overseas friends to do my bidding. Sasquatch was obsessed with expensive watches and golf. He played regularly and watched pro golf both on TV and live. He would incessantly chatter on about both subjects. To bait him, I arranged for him to be approached for an executive position with a major Swiss watch company for a position tied to pro golf and other swanky sports, sponsorships, and included a shopping list of benefits and perquisites. The job would require hobnobbing with major sports organizers, flying around the world, first class, natch, and basically spending money. It was a job he could only dream of. The setup. In the slow and methodical long con, I strung him along until the time was right to close with an offer. The only catch was that he had to report to Switzerland for final offer and onboarding. I deliberately scheduled it for the week of the old jobs division meetings and reporting. They were mandatory and impossible to miss without raising red flags. Sasquatch was worried that his absence would be impossible to cover, especially if he was out of the country. The headhunting firm said they could move the appointment up a few days, so that he would be able to attend his meeting, but that he would need to purchase an unrestricted business class seat and make his own hotel reservations. Save your receipts, and the watch company will reimburse you, he was told. Sasquatch showed up to his swanky hotel suite, using his own credit card for the $$ room, and promptly received a note from the watch company that his appointment had to be rescheduled for the following Monday, because of a major corporate crisis. Sasquatch called the phony recruiter in a panic about missing the corporate meetings back in the States. It was agreed that he would call in sick, and that whatever happened with the old job, he was heading to much greener fairways. He. Enjoy your weekend in Europe. By Monday you'll be in your dream job. The sting. While Sasquatch was cooling his jets in Europe, I nonchalantly called his boss, the president of the division, and casually asked for a reference on Sasquatch's work ethic and dates of employment. You'd be surprised how often this mistake happens. The president, to his credit, didn't tip his hand or act very surprised by the call, but like a good corporate wonk, he referred me to human resources. I let it slip that he was in Europe finalizing his new job, and that he'd already given the company notice. My bad. Bloody aftermath and how the Revenge overstepped its original mission. Eventually, I was able to put together the aftermath from old coworkers and other people in the trade, who did not know I was the Revenge Ninja. When Monday came and went, Sasquatch must have been apoplectic. This is to be assumed since we had cut all communications to let him twist in the wind, because we received at least 20 calls to the exchange and multiple faxes. Sasquatch hung around the hotel for a day or two, and then finally decided to leave for home. I assume at some point he may have contacted the watch company, but I never confirmed it. When he finally got home, he found his office had been packed up and left with his wife. An HR person met him off-site to give him his severance and retrieve the car and other company property. I heard his wife left him sometime later and his mistress was fired for theft. I figure he spent at least $10,000 on travel and hotel. Epilogue. I wish I could say I tipped my hand and told Sasquatch that I was the author of his demise, but it really served no purpose, and in theory may have exposed me to some retribution of my own. By my moral lodestar, I got even with a thief who was content to steal and take my livelihood. That was plenty. Sicilian Alzheimer's, never forget an offense. Very humbled that this blew up. I have been accused of having a cold heart on those who have slighted me. I'm not too proud to admit there were some revenge plans that backfired, or were never implemented. I'm an argumentative SOB and comfortable enough in my own skin to take a few random jabs and some healthy skepticism from Redditors. I defend myself in the hope that someone will learn that there are indeed times when revenge is appropriate. My real-world experiences came before the internet, doxing, ghosting, texting, social media, Google, and all the other stuff that makes people sure everything is a scam. I've had some fun and memorable experiences in my life. The story of Sasquatch is true and less complicated than you'd think. The key to any confidence scam, literally the word con comes from confidence, is the confidence the mark puts on the con artist. Sasquatch was a Swiss watch fanboy. He wore expensive models and knew everything there was to know about rare watches and their complications. Additionally, he lived for golf, played golf, watched golf, anything golf. So when my real recruiter friend from the UK called him and said my Swiss client is confidentially putting together a hospitality/ambassador position in the US, we are looking for someone who knows golf and other sports, knows watches, and is comfortable with high-level interactions at a six-figure salary with a huge travel budget, car and entertainment allowances, free or low-cost access to the best watches in the world, and a budget to set up a small team of minions. How hard do you think it would be for him to recruit Sasquatch? A few faxes from a third party, a phone call or two, and some cobbled together letterhead, and the guy was hooked. If Sasquatch harbored any concerns that it was fake, he certainly would have refused to lay out travel expenses. I myself have fronted travel money while interviewing, so it really wasn't much of a reach. I'll say that revenge isn't always pleasant, and sometimes I think it feels a little sickening. These are the consequences of this type of action. As I age, I agree to a certain extent that living well is the best revenge, but only after someone pays for what they did. I thought I was done with my revenge, till my former boss gave me a second chance years later. This happened a few years back, and recently the whole ordeal just gained some new ramifications, so be advised, it's a long tale. Part 1, where I caused my old boss to lose a buttload of money due to software piracy. A lit context: I'm a teacher with a degree in advertising and have been involved with IT for the past 20-something years. I've found my love for teaching just some 10 years ago. I passed through a lot of schools in the meantime, from the big ones to the smallest ones, and accumulated a bunch of experience both in the classroom and behind the scenes, designing workbooks, video courses, learning platforms and such. So I started thinking it was past the time to migrate to a management position. The opportunity came in a prestigious school of digital art, and I became its teaching manager, overseeing all the teachers and the intern learning routines. It was a hard but honest job. For a time. Soon it became obvious that my boss was not exactly what he tried to present to students and employees. He would display bursts of anger and antagonize the team, demanding impossible results and asking about tasks that he never assigned, but somehow was our job to guess. One time, during a meeting, he grabbed a big chair and pretended to throw it across the room. It was his idea of a joke. Nobody even flinched, cause nobody doubted for a second he was capable of actually doing the deed. Needless to say, nobody laughed as well. In my country, employers may hold employees' contracts up to 3 months, which means that for 90 days you have no job security, and may be fired at any moment without any consequence to the company. Which my boss reminded everyone all the time, half joking, trying to keep everybody on their toes. He actually excused me from this treatment. He had this bad habit as treating the managers differently, and gave me constant praise for a good job till the day my temp contract ended, meaning I was then an actual employee, with full benefits and couldn't be fired without him paying me everything the law stated. So it really surprised me when he started the hostile treatment not 24 hours after my temporary contract ended and the full employment began. Gone were the praises and in their place came screams, bad reviews and more insane demands. We paid an outside company to do maintenance on the classroom PCs every week, but somehow bugs and crashes were now my fault. One time he made me stay after hours, on a Saturday, after all students and staff had left, and prohibited me from going home before I had all computers running smoothly. He asked me to find him a new seller, and I introduced a friend, making it clear that by no means I was asking for him to be hired. I was just making introductions, and if he liked the guy after they talked, it was his own decision and responsibility to hire him or not. A few weeks later he gave me an earful for going for drinks with this friend of mine, saying that managers should stick with managers, and that I should mingle with him, not the staff, cause they were beneath us, apparently. I said this was absurd, reminded him that I knew this guy for years already, and that if he wanted to, he could join us for drinks anytime. It was not the response he expected. The abuse continued and actually intensified. One day I started to feel chest pains, and my left arm went completely numb. While my friend called for an ambulance, I retreated to my boss's office, at the time being occupied by his fiancée, and calmly told her, "Don't mind me. I think I'm having a heart attack, so I'll just lay here for a few minutes so the students can't see me." Of course, she went nuts after this. The good news, it wasn't a heart attack, but an anxiety attack, and wasn't the last one. I was 36 at the time, and it was the first time I saw my mom cry since my dad passed, more than 20 years prior from, of course, a heart attack. I decided enough was enough, so I gave my 30 days notice, citing health issues. I hadn't yet completed 6 months working there. I sat down with my boss, did not blame him in any way, but said the stress was making me worry about leaving my family too soon, and gave him every guarantee he needed that I would work through my entire notice period in order to complete every single project we started since my hiring. So I finished updating the courses, finished the development of our brand new e-learning platform, finished hiring the teachers for the next semester. I even shoot videos to promote every single course on the school's menu. Less than a week left till my last day, he called me in his office to show the company's new career plans. I don't know the equivalent term in English, but it's the path planned by the company for the growth of each position. So you see. That's what you're going to earn in a few months. That is, if you stop being a sissy and just do your effing job. I could not believe it. After all the abuse, all the toxicity, I had tried to go the higher road and end everything on a good note, and he called my health issues being a sissy. I was done. I told him to just deduce the next few days from my final payment and left. Now for the revenge. Remember how I introduced him to a friend and he actually hired the guy? On my final days, I announced my boss I would open my own school after leaving, but failed to mention that this other employee was my business partner. So when my friend asked himself for his 30 days notice, our boss went livid. He all but threw out my friend, telling him to never put his feet there again, and leave immediately. According to the law, that means he had to pay for that whole month, plus every remaining day he worked before, plus commissions. Adding to that my own last payment, which came with 6 months of benefits, he had more than enough to start our new venture. But that's not the revenge. He actually made us sign a sort of NDA with a bunch of illegal clauses, which made the whole contract invalid, preventing us from revealing any company secrets during or after our time with them, at the risk of being fined $30, around $6,000 at the time. However, no contract in the world may prevent one, at least in my country, from reporting any illegal activities. Which is why I did not worried one bit when I reported him and his school for having 50+ PCs running on pirate versions of Windows, Office, the whole Adobe suite, Revit, Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, and lots of other very expensive software. Not long before this, a big and traditional chain of stores had gone bankrupt in our state for having to pay retroactively fines upon fines on Windows alone, so it's an understatement to say that the government was taking piracy pretty seriously at the time. It gets funnier when you realize that the reported person receives an email with the whole complaint, apart from the author of the report, the minute it is filed, so he can prepare his defense. His response wasn't at all unexpected. Some 5 minutes after our report, a similar email came into our inbox, reporting us for 30 unlicensed copies of Windows and many other programs. My business partner still talked to the finance manager on our old job and, knowing that our ex-boss would probably be right beside him fuming and screaming, decided to send him a picture of our only classroom. With no computer in sight, we decided to specialize in classes about comic book making, which dispensed computers, and whenever we would host a class that demanded it, we would ask our students to bring their own. A few weeks later, I heard that the whole remaining staff abandoned ship, leaving him with only an intern and a few teachers without permanent contracts. My former boss actually kept tabs on us and, learning that some of his teachers were contacting us to host special classes, started to blackmail them, threatening to terminate their contracts if they insisted on doing business with us, even though there was no exclusivity clause in their contracts. Some of them called on the bluff, and he had to pay another load of money on breach of contracts alone. Time went by and I hear the guy is counting his pennies and struggling to keep afloat. He used to open full classes each 6 months, occupying every date and time available. Now, he hardly can fill a turn, started holding only night classes, and not even every day half the week he closes his doors, not having enough students nor the money to pay employees on these days. Before I left, he had paid $40 on the architectural project alone to expand the business within a year, but now I hear he was considering closing his door and offering only online courses. Even before the pandemic. And now for the part 2, where, years after my revenge, I made my ex-boss again pay a bunchload of money, this time on legal fees. First of all, I need to say that my own school has closed its doors. Me and my friend were not a good fit, as business partners at least, and now we're not even friends. That's life. We cashed out, sold what could be sold, and each went with our lives. I may eventually write about my petty revenge against this guy. You can say I hold many grudges, but this tale is not about him. Some months later, I found out our ex-boss was suing us. Our school, that is. Which, as I mentioned, didn't even exist anymore. My ex-friend's sister, who is also his lawyer, contacted me and told me about it. I couldn't find anything on the public records, since the lawsuit was running on court-ordered sigil. I talked to my own lawyer and she said, if they didn't cite you directly, pretend you know nothing about the matter. And so I ignored the issue for a few years. During lockdown, the appointed official finally found me at home and served me. That also gave me access to my boss's claims, since I had 15 days to prepare my defense. My wife found me laughing out loud in front of the computer. His claims were absolutely ridiculous. He claimed I stole his courses, and used as proof a print from our, now offline, site, side by side with his own, saying something in the lines of it becomes obvious that both schools have the same courses. However, he presented no explanation of the similarities besides the names, which weren't even the same. We had a segment of trainings under the umbrella graphic design, but no class with that specific name, for example, and no other class on any of his main subjects. Also, most of our classes were in the topic of comic books, which he never worked with. He also called us cynical for daring to compete with him on the same market, even if it was my own previous experience on the learning sector that landed me the job on his firm in the first place. At one point, the documents cited a statement from our site where we said that we took our previous experiences as a way to learn with our mistakes and do differently, and call it a confession of plagiarism. I asked my lawyer to let me write my own defense, leaving to her the task to translate it to lawyerism. She actually copy-pasted my full statement, saying she couldn't have argued better. I put on paper all the repulse I felt, cited all my experience with teaching and rebuked every single one of his claims with facts and actual proofs, attaching printed conversations, saved emails and bringing attention to his own lacking of proof. The judge tossed the case and made him pay all the legal fees, including my lawyers. He could have avoided it if he had entered the lawsuit on small claims court, but since he wanted the $30,000 from the NDA plus damages and sigil, he had it coming. Just another shove of dirt on his coffin. Thanks for watching.